Okay, this is the daily money making setups on the S&P E-mini for June 25th. We're using the 1500 tick bar chart and the processtrading.com rate edge trading system. Now we can see from even the overnight hours, here's 625 where it started right here, and it just started on a steady and slow descent. Here's the 9:30 time frame right here. And the first thing that I want to point out here, and we'll see how we could have determined these trading points one by one, but on an overall inspection, when we look at the day in general, here we have, oops, let me get rid of this line here. Here we have the contrarian bands, right here and right here. And remember, this is the process trading VWAP line, which also is for trend trading. It also acts as a support and resistance, and it also acts as a regression to the mean line. Where does price regress to the mean from? Well, once again, it regressed to the mean from the contrarian lines. And let's see how this day played out. Of all days, this was a great day to show that effect. We see the contrarian lines, the top one and the bottom right here. And we see as price came down to the contrarian line, and I'll show you how we picked this point out here in just a second, then it regressed back up to the mean, or the VWAP line. Then it came back down. It hit the contrarian line, and then it started to regress back up. It reverted, went down past the contrarian line, got a timing alert dot, and then regressed back up to the mean, or resistance, because this also serves as support and resistance. Then it went back down to the contrarian line. Imagine that. And now it went back up to the mean. So you can see the probability in making these trades once you determine how those trades are going to stand out. Well, let's start at the beginning of the day, and we'll look at our chart. Okay, so here's the beginning of the day over here, started at 9:30. We saw that since the actually midnight when the 625 started, price had been declining, and then it came to this point right at the open here. At the open, we have some clear signs of what's going to happen. First of all, we had the price cycle bar cross support, and then another two price cycle bars showed up right underneath it, and they went below the stop exit line. At that point, what we're trying to determine is this selling at the high or buying at the low. Well, this represents selling. We can know that because here's the effect of the sentiment oscillator down here, with conviction of the trading community going down and coming to the midpoint. It's right at that midpoint. You can see right here that momentum, that's this line here, crosses down through sentiment, crosses through the midline, and angles sharply down towards the lower bound. At the same time, conviction is sloping down. So there is not hardly any demand here. That would be the green bar, where we do see supply starting to come in. So we know that this is the selling at the high. Now the point is to how to calculate where that trend is going to be taken. So we follow the price cycle bars because we know that two things are happening. Price is either accumulating or it's cycling. In this case, it's cycling, and it's cycling to the downside. It's so we see the price cycle bars coming here. They're below the stop exit line. They're representing more selling. Now it gets down to here, which is right at the contrarian line, and as could be expected, we see some dissipation of supply here, and price makes a slight move up, but really that's more of a lateral move, and that lateral move then says, well, price came down. It came down to this point here. We don't see any price cycle bars here. So that's an indication that it's the down move is not over as well. And this represents then another period of accumulation. But we have to know, what are they accumulating? Well, right here, we find that out. As soon as the price cycle bars start to go below the stop exit line, and it's continuing on down. So we follow this along, and the price cycle bars keep going lower here until it hits the contrarian line here. And again, it's from the contrarian line where price would regress to the mean, and it goes up, but again, it goes laterally. Price goes laterally and sideways because we see some supply is dissipating here, but we don't see any demand. We don't see any green line, any green bars here. So, in fact, price is actually coming down a little bit, but this actually represents another consolidation area right in here. Until we get over to, let's move that over here. Until we get over to this area in here. Now we see a doji, we see an inverted hammer here, we see another price bar above the stop exit line, and we saw this bar down here. So this bar down here represented buying at the bottom. The way that we were able to determine that is through this bar right here. This bar right here came back up through the stop exit line and closed above it, and then you had the doji and the inverted hammer. So we know here, and also when we look down here, we see at this point the momentum line coming up through the bottom, cutting across sentiment, going to the top. So by this time over here, you see the supply show up significantly. This would be where you would get into the move. Now over here, you could ask yourself, well, is this selling at the top? Because these two price cycle bars drop below the stop exit line. But when we look down here, we see that demand has just started to come in, and even though there's weakness in demand by the gray bars, they're still very tall, they're still very prominent. This actually represents a pullback rather than selling. There's no selling here. If it was selling, these bars would be all the way down here. Remember, supply is shown in red. So this, we know, is a pullback. So we're waiting now to see how far will price go. Well, remember, price regresses from the contraband back up to the mean. It gets back up here. This represents selling at the top. When we look down here, we see that momentum is at the above the upper bound, and it's cutting down through the sentiment line right there. This represents it at the top, but there was a lot of demand here, and all the residual energy is not out of that trend yet. So this represents the first selling at the top or profit taking, and then here's the residual energy that's left in that trend. And right here we see the more selling at the top, and this bar right here, matter of fact, these three bars, but this white bar here, along with this configuration, this white price cycle bar going below the stop exit line after these two configurations of price cycle bars, tells us that now price is going to decline again. And we see that right here with the momentum cutting down, and now the sentiment line itself is starting to slope down, as well as the short-term trend is starting. It came back to the pullback line, couldn't go much above it, and now is pulling back again. So now we're watching, once again, we're watching the price cycle bars. Here's this configuration of price cycle bars where they're selling, 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 selling. Now, this represents some buying right here. It's not the time to enter into the trade, but you can see right at this bar, here is a yellow marker on the Intergy, which shows a indication of some strength. We see that the momentum line is coming up, cutting up through the sentiment line here. So this is our first indication to start to really pay attention to see when the buying at the bottom is going to take place. And we come down here. This represents more selling. Now here and here we get a timing alert dot, and price is below the contrarian line. So this is where price regresses to the mean from. Well, it does start to regress, and we see this cycle bar here tell us, yes, price is going to go up, and that's verified down here with the discretionary indicators, with supply coming in and momentum going up, and it goes up, but it doesn't regress all the way up to support. So just like before, where this is, you can visually see this is kind of a lateral movement here. This is a more accumulation, and then this bar right here tells us what is really taking place, because it drops down below the stop exit line. So we know that this is actually selling going on here, and we see that in the configuration, that demand had come in and now it fell off, and now it's at the no demand line. Back here we had the momentum cutting across the sentiment oscillator way back here. So we know that this is selling here. This is more selling, more selling. So we're looking for, so it's still in the selling cycle, in the selling cycle here, and now we're looking for the bottom as well. We get that bottom right here. We see with this kind of a hanging man type of candlestick here, and its coloration, we see it is a price cycle bar, and then we get a timing alert dot. The price is well below the contrarian band, and then relatively to all the other candles, this is a large candle up. It goes up. We get two trend alert dots here to the upside, and then price right here with this inverted hammer here candle closes above the contrarian band, and this represents actually buying at the bottom, as does this, So down here, this is where we knew with this this price cycle bar right here, this large green demand bar, and then the two trend bars coming along with the sentiment oscillator and the momentum going upward. Then we follow along for the rest of the day. And again, we're always asking ourselves, what do these cycle bars tell us? What are they showing us? Because that's really what we're following. We're following the price action as well, but we're following these in particular. And again, here it is, a price cycle bar that is dropped below the stop exit line, which could indicate some selling. And as a matter of fact, the momentum line is cutting down through the sentiment oscillator here. We see conviction is still very high, but right at this point, we get a trend dot here, as well as we get one up here. And the this is going to represent a pullback, in this buy cycle right here, this green one right here. So we have that pullback here. Then we have a minor pullback right here where demand really is weak right here, but there's no supply. Even though momentum went down, crossed through the midline, and is heading towards the lower bound, no supply showed up. So prices then continue on up. Here we have a classic selling at the top where we see demand falling off. We see the momentum cutting down through the conviction, and these two bars dropping in tandem below the stop exit line. That's selling at the top, and this is buying at the bottom. So we recognize these patterns, and we know how to read these patterns. Now, we see that on this bar, the momentum is at the lower bound here, and that supply had started coming in. We recognize that this is selling at the top. We recognize that this is buying at the bottom. And so if we go along here, we get up to this point where this, now price had gone up, and it had gone back to the mean. And at this point here, we see that the VWAP is gray, which tells us we're in a downtrend, and we know that because it's been in that way all day. But here we have a blue segment to the gray VWAP, which tells us it's overextended. Well, it's overextended right when we get a price cycle bar and a timing alert dot at the high. And here we have that classic configuration again, where these two price cycle bars drop below the stop exit line. So we know that this is indeed selling at the top, and we get in and we ride this down. So that's what the day looked like today. It certainly was a great day for trading. There was lots of volatility, lots of long extended runs, lots of time where you didn't have to try to guess. You could just wait for a high probability trade just like this. So that's how this system turns it in from just a indicator system into more of a science where you're actually following along as what is happening, and you're able to read actually the telltale signs of when it's happening, what is happening, and why it's happening. So that's it for the video tonight. Hope you go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and if you want to see the whole system, it's over on processtrading.com. So until next time, I hope all your trades are successful.